Welcome back, everybody, to Not Funny Guys Presents Red Dwarf Rewatch. I am your host, Dr. John, and boy, whew, we have reached the end of Series 6, and we are going out with a bang. So let's get into it right now. Episode 6, Out of Time, directed by Andy Emony and written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. And this one was released on the 11th of November, 1993. So let's get into it, starting with a summary. Starbug enters an artificial fog containing devices that create false realities. Persevering their way through it, the crew find what is hiding, a base station with a time machine on it, basically. Shortly after, they meet their future selves from 15 years on. The crew learn of the future selves that they are incredibly corrupt and amoral through the abuse of the time drive to experience the very best of history, which happens to be in the hands of the very worst. In the end, the two Starbug craft get into the space battle to end all space battles. And that's putting it lightly. Let's break this down. Open on Starbug again. This is getting repetitive, right? Crew having coffee and they're having a meeting, and it's apparently Rimmer's meeting. And it's he's basically laying out this whole idea of him being morale officer. Super chirpy for this meeting too. He immediately then says they should meet weekly to have it out with their grievances, and he decides it's his turn to go first. He digs into Lister, wants to basically stab out his eyes, calls the cat a git, and just talks about Crichton pissing him off. Then he says, "What a wonderful meeting, I feel better," and he's off. See you next week. Cat, of course, chimes in, what's eating him? And everyone basically talks about how they're tense. There's this meaningless drone about the lives they're living right now. Everyone complains about Rimmer, of course. Apparently talks about, Lister tells a story about how Rimmer once tried to, he got so annoyed with Lister that he tried to shove a fridge down his mouth. And they talk about how they're basically living very dull lives, variety of life, things always are the same. And of course, no one wants to drink Crichton's wine made out of urine recyc. And of course, this is when they get an alert. And by the way, this whole idea of being dull lives, about to come back and bite them. So they are now entering this sort of stellar fog. They get hit. Lister is knocked out, and he's taken to the ops room where apparently he discovered that he's a droid. 3000 series made in Taiwan. Everyone is in disbelief. Cat says that he would have smelled it. Crichton tells this whole story about how they were rejected because they were too human-like, and basically that most of them went into hiding and erased their memories. And so he's basically then Crichton basically comments that since this is an earlier model, he outranks him. Rimmer really wants to break the news, but Crichton says no, let it be him. Crichton tells Lister that he's a droid. He doesn't believe it. Crichton then tells him he gets the front seat now, and Lister is in charge of the laundry. Crichton is really mad about all this because apparently he's really mostly mad not only because he looked up to Lister, but because he had spent the last 4 years basically cleaning his underwear. Shocker. They hit another shock pocket again, this energy pocket on the bridge. Lister is bringing them up refreshments. Crichton's being really snobby to him. And this is when they figure out through cross-reference to the computer that these are unreality pockets, designed to protect basically high-level Space Corps things. They create unreality pockets that make them think things that are not what they are in order to basically cause them to go back. And this is when Crichton puts it together that, yeah, Lister's not a droid. He gets super guilty. Right as Lister brings him this log cabin of like little chocolate sticks. Oh, Crichton then goes into full guilt mode, brings Lister cold beer, so guilty, he promises to find a way to punish him. Something about plugging directly into a socket. They're trying to pick their way through the unreality bubbles. They get another one, and Cat now apparently is invisible to the crew, and he's panicking as no one seems to be able to hear him, and they start to forget him, and he's full panic mode when they pop back out, and they're like, what's going on? And he's like, you guys were forgetting me. And they bump into one where they all have the animal heads on their heads, and the pockets are getting denser, and at one point the ship up here around them appears to disappear. And Lister believes they need to keep going, and Rimmer calls for a stop. And so they basically decide to lock themselves into the sleep units and the quarters for 3 days while they pass through where they'll basically be protected. They arrive at a derelict station. 28th century technology. The crew was dead. This was the coordinates in deep space where it was designed to send, but it has a time machine on board. And apparently they caught some sort of virus in the 20th century. Makes sense. Now they have a time machine. And they try to decide on where to go. And they argue about it over like inane choices in years. And they travel to 1421. And it is 1421 in deep space. They can move through time, but not space. So there's really this whole idea of this is kind of pointless. They really need a faster than light drive. When all of a sudden they are encountering an alert, there is another starbug out there. And it's them from the future. Crichton then locks out the comms, basically talks about space-time anomalies and everything. And the other ship appears to be in trouble. So Crichton decides that he will talk to them and then erase his memory. Crichton comes back from the cockpit to talk to them. He's talked to the crew. He gets really touchy-feely with Lister all of a sudden. It tells them that they're 15 years in the future and they need to copy components from their time drive because the other one they've broken theirs. And the crew will have to quarantine while they're on board. Crichton's guilt is blowing up, all centered around Lister. When they go to the kitchen and Lister says, "Don't Nixon me, man. Tell me the truth." And Crichton does not want to give anything away. He then sends them off to the quarters for their quarantine. Lister rigs up things so they can peek in and listen in on what's going on. The Crichton then docks to the other ship and the other crew comes aboard. Rimmer is a fatty. Cat is gone balding and Crichton has designed a human toupee to make himself look more human. They're time travelers now. He has to fit in. And Lister's with them. The reason Crichton was being so touchy-feely is that something terrible happened to him. He's now a brain in a jar, which feels like right out of Futurama in many ways. Like I said, the other crew is peeking in. They see themselves and realizes that it really falls apart for Lister when he realizes he's a brain in a jar. And then they get curious and they listen in, and we cut back to the main dining area where Kay is serving them urine recycle that they get really pissed about because they're now time connoisseurs. They're used to the finest things. Louis XVI made a banquet for them. They met with the Borgias and the Nazis, and apparently they're really close friends with Hitler's and the Goerings, as long as you don't talk politics. And basically they pal around with the worst people who happen to be the ones who typically have the finer things that they want. Crichton really is getting mad at them, the current Crichton, calling them amoral, self-serving scum. So I'm going to refer to this other crew, this from the future, the Gluttons. And now the modern crew, the present crew, has come in and tells them to get off the ship. And they leave under threat. The Gluttons, as I'm going to call them, turn on their other selves in the past. They're threatening. There's a missile lock. They get into a huge fight trying to disable them. No intention of giving up their lives. They'd rather be dead than not have these finer things. So better off than dead than be rats in deep space. And this comes back to the whole thing we talked about, the spice and variety of life. Rimmer then decides we're going to fight back. He says better dead than smeg. So then they get into a firefight. They shoot. Lister gets killed. The hull is collapsing. Cat gets killed, and Crichton gets killed right before he tries to tell Rimmer something. Rimmer tries to figure it out, and then he sort of realizes, and he runs down to the drive room, runs into the engine room with the bazookoid, blasts the Starbug time drive just as Starbug appears to be destroyed. And of course we get to be continued. So you only have to wait till Friday to find out as we start Series 7 and Tikka to Ride. So, but this is one of the things I like about Red Dwarf is the way these generally compact, really tight focused episodes, particularly this one, where we start out with this whole complaint about dull, monotonous space life, and then what did they get? They got this time drive and supposedly ended up on this timeline trajectory where they then didn't have to have anything ever be dull, but that lack of dulness led them into a life of corruption, amorality, and just really disgusting sewer dwellers they became afterwards. Like I said, love this stuff. Now, all that being said, please like, subscribe, follow along, all that stuff. If you would like to throw out ideas for things, please write us at notfunnyguys.offthereels@gmail.com. In the ticker and the description below, write me about anything you want to see me doing on these episodes where we keep going with Red Dwarf. We got a little bit of ways to go. We're literally at just about the halfway point here. So we have more. So it's only going to keep getting more interesting. I promise you. So stick around, write me, tell me the ideas, comment on the videos themselves. But please feel free to write us about anything you see here on our YouTube channel where we talk about TV shows. You can also write us about other things. Well, also from the Not Funny Guys, we have our main podcast, Not Funny Guys Presents Off the Reels, where we talk about movies. We are just finished a Martin Scorsese 3-pack of films. We looked at Wolf of Wall Street, Taxi Driver, and After Hours. So we picked some fun little obscure ones, but we generally had a good time on all of them. But we're now moving on to the Jurassic Park franchise. But before we get to that, we have our Thanksgiving special coming up next week, where we are looking at trains, planes, and automobiles. Nothing like Steve Martin and John Candy to really warm the cockles of your heart. So you should come and join us there. If you're interested in movies, come join us, listen to our podcast over there. If that's not your thing, we also have a sort of semi-academic based podcast that I do with our Not Funny gal, Dr. Kristen, called Not Funny Guys Presents Thinking About Thinking, where we talk about all kinds of things, basically anything we're thinking about, which tends to be things about academics, AI, culture, the like. We keep it fast and loose and fun, and I will continue to admit that I think Dr. Kristen's episodes are the better episodes because we trade off topics. And finally, if that's not your thing, we also have my other two Not Funny Guys, Casey and Eric, co-hosts of mine with the main podcast Off the Reels. They do another one called Wrestling with the Horror of It All, where they watch horror films and talk about wrestling, mainly WWE. So check that one out. But as I said, like, subscribe, comment, share. We want to hear from you guys. Write to us in the email or commenting on any of our videos. We greatly appreciate it. But in the meantime, until then, don't be a smeghead. Keep it not funny, and I'll see you next time.